You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman. Our producer Shannon Summers is off today, a well-earned vacation day. Tom Orr is here as always. Tom, how's it going?
It's great. It's 9,000 degrees here, and our air conditioning isn't working right now, and the repair person can't come till tomorrow. So if I sound like I'm drenched in sweat, that's why.
Wow, I was going to ask how it is, it being in the dead middle of summer already in May, but it sounds like it's not going great.
It could be better. We had a nice cross breeze in the office, and I had to close the windows because there were stupid birds outside singing, and that was going to screw up our audio. So it'll be nice and stagnant here. So that should really up my performance today, I think.
Awesome, because I record upstairs, and it's about 10 or 12 degrees warmer upstairs than it is downstairs. And I have to have the windows closed because birds, trains, whatever, and I can't have a fan on. So this is probably going to be maybe the grumpiest show of the season, which I think that's okay.
We try and set the bar higher and higher there every single week. I think we can top ourselves this week. Can't wait.
This one might be explicit.
We're going to earn that tag this week.
Where to start? Let's start with Zach Harrison, the 5-star defensive end out of Lewis Center, which is about 10-15 miles north of Columbus. It's just a suburb of Columbus, south of Delaware, in Delaware County-ish, I guess, depending on where you are. So needless to say, he's a kid that should be a Buckeye, just based on geography. He set up, let's just tell you, he's the number 2 player in the nation in the 24/7 composite, 2019 defensive end. The number 2 weak side defensive end, because the number 1 player in the nation is also a weak side defensive end, I believe. And so last week, he scheduled his official visits for Michigan and Ohio State to take place in the third week of June, a midweek official visit to Michigan, followed by a weekend official visit to Ohio State. And Tom, if Ohio State was getting a midweek official visit, I can't imagine Buckeye fans would be too thrilled about that as opposed to a weekend visit.
No, I would think. I mean, during the summer, I don't know how much of a difference it really makes, because it's not like there's a million people on campus during the week, or you're seeing, the hustle and bustle of campus on a weekday, or you're seeing, a game on the weekend. In June, it doesn't really matter. There's not very many people on campus either way. It is the kind of thing that you would, if you were the weekday school, you would absolutely be freaking out about that as, what does it mean? It doesn't necessarily mean anything. But that definitely, please do not let that keep you from freaking out about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big deal. So Harrison, he's a really good track guy, and at 6'6", 240 pounds, he shouldn't be. So that tells you the kind of athlete he is. If you want to go and Google image search him, there's a picture of him playing wide receiver in a game where he looks like he's about 8 feet tall, playing against a corner who, I don't know, a 4th grader maybe. If you just go ahead and Google image search Zach Harrison, you'll eventually see that. Scroll down and see it. It's amazing. I showed it to family members like a month ago, and they were pretty impressed, kind of blown away. And that's just one of the things. He runs a 4.6, and just a really natural, freakish athlete, and a guy that Ohio State has to get, basically. I remember last year I asked Urban, alluding to Zach Harrison, if if there's a guy like this out there, do you put a mandate out to your staff that we have to get him? And he said they didn't. But um, Tom, we went looking back to see who was the last must get from Ohio, as hyped as Zach Harrison, or maybe not necessarily as hyped, but as important. And I got to 2011 with Braxton Miller and 2006 with Beanie. I think those two guys they had to get, and if they didn't, they would have been in trouble. You went further back than that?
I did. I went back to 2000 in the 247 database, and the rankings get a little squirrely when you get further back. You get into classes where it looks like certain schools only sign 6 guys and that kind of stuff. So the rankings get a little squirrely that far back. But the last player who to be ranked number 2 in the nation or higher as a prospect from Ohio was Ted Ginn in 2004. So if you want to go purely by the numbers, he's the best prospect from Ohio since Ted Ginn, which, that's been a minute.
The funny thing is, he was a corner, so they missed out on getting that number 1, number 2 corner, but they made up for it by getting a hit at receiver. If they wouldn't have gotten Braxton in 2011, we could have finally, seen what a full-fledged Joe Bauserman offense could have done in 2011. But the interesting thing is had Jim Tressel not been fired, there's a pretty good chance they would have gotten Jameis Winston in 2012. So that may have all worked out. And if Taggate would have never happened, you could have gone from Terrell Pryor to, I guess, maybe Jameis Winston, and that wouldn't have been too bad. But no Braxton Miller, I don't know, Kenny Guyton, and Cardale Jones wouldn't have been ready. He wasn't ready until December of 2014. So that was a pretty big must get. And I wonder. The answer is that Urban Meyer still would have taken the job, but if there's no Braxton Miller, does he think maybe a few minutes longer?
Yeah, for sure. Having a Braxton Miller as a sophomore coming in, that certainly made that job more appealing. I think you're right. I don't think it really changes his mind on taking the job. But I mean, I think he was announcing one of the games earlier in that year, and just sitting there listening to Urban Meyer talk about Braxton Miller, you could tell the wheels were already turning, like all the different things you could do with this guy if you were coaching him. So. I think having Braxton Miller on that team certainly made that decision a little bit easier for Urban Meyer.
Beanie in 2006, he was down to Ohio State and Michigan. He was the number 1 running back in the nation. I don't know where he was in the national rankings, maybe top 10, something like that.
He was 7th overall in that class.
If they don't get him, they'd probably still maybe end up with a James Aldridge or one of those guys who's not as good or not as name brand. But, Tom, do you think maybe we would have gotten a senior year out of Antonio Pittman?
I think there's a pretty good chance that happens because he played his 3 years and was splitting carries with Wells that last year in 2006. So, and Wells came on pretty strong towards the end of that year especially. So, yeah, I think for sure he saw the writing on the wall there. And it wasn't, where did he go, 3rd round or something like that? It wasn't like he was a, surefire, leave early, 1st round lock kind of guy in 2006. So, maybe without Wells there, maybe he puts up a huge year in 2006 and then then he does leave early and you don't have Beanie Wells. And then in 2007, who do you have? I don't remember who their backup to Beanie Wells in 2007 was.
In 2007, it was that freshman
Maurice Wells?
Yeah, Mo Wells, and you had the freshman Brandon Sane and Boom Herron, although Boom Herron redshirted. So it wasn't great, Tom.
Since you mentioned Brandon Sane, I actually looked this up. We were talking about Zach Harrison earlier. Zach Harrison ran a 10.82 in the 100-meter dash in a track meet this spring. So 10.82. The record holder for Division I Ohio high school is Brandon Sane, who we were just talking about, who former Ohio State running back. He ran it in 10.38 seconds. So I went back and tried to do kind of some back of the envelope kind of math. And basically, if you took Brandon Sane, who is the fastest person to ever run the 100 meters in Division I big school Ohio high school track, if you started him on the goal line and Zach Harrison on the goal line, and they ran all the way the length of the field, 100 yards, which isn't, it's not quite 100 meters, but it's close enough. If they ran the length of the field, Brandon Sane, who is the fastest person in Ohio high school track history, would beat Zach Harrison by 4 yards. 100 yards to 96 yards. That's about the, that's not exact, but that's about right. So if you'd like a defensive end who can run and almost run down the fastest athlete in Ohio track history, then if that sounds like a useful piece to you for your team, then yeah, that's a recruitment you're going to want to watch.
And Ohio State, they want these 10-5 receivers and running backs, but they're okay with settling for the 10-7, 10-8 guys. And that's that dude is a defensive end and he's 6'6", and he was at the opening regional in Canton this year. And didn't bother running the 40 because last year he ran it in 4.62, I think, or 4.61, and as not even prior to his junior year, so you don't really have to prove much more there. But the 2007 season, it's a good thing they did get Beanie because they would have been up the man. Mo Wells and Brandon Sane. No shake, no bake, but good open field speed, but there was never any open field.
They would have had a little bit of bake on that team because they got Eugene Clifford, who was a 5-star in 2007 as well. He didn't last long. I as I was going back to these classes, there were a couple. Just looking at the 5-star kids from Ohio, it's like, wow, there's a lot of these guys who didn't work out. Ben Martin, who went to Tennessee in 2007 and basically didn't turn into anything. Eugene Clifford in 2007 went to Ohio State, got booted from the team. Beanie Wells in 2006 obviously was a star. Robert Rose was a 5-star in 2006, same class as Beanie Wells, and he was okay. He was kind of a role player at defensive end for Ohio State, but never anything remotely like a 5-star. The expectation that you come in with as a 5-star. Alex Boone the year before, 2005. I mean, he obviously had some off-the-field issues at Ohio State, but was a solid contributor. And then Jamario O'Neal, who came in as a 5-star and really didn't ever pan out to a whole lot. He started a few games, but not a ton. And then the year before that was Ted Ginn, who obviously turned into a huge star. Fred Davis, who went to USC, who was a very good player for them. Year before that, Prescott Burgess, who went to Michigan and, was okay, but nothing remarkable. Dante Whitner, who was great for Ohio State. And then Louis Irizarry, who was another guy who, looked pretty promising as a freshman at tight end and then had some off-the-field issues and got booted. Year before that, it was Mike DeAndrea, who had knee injury issues and never really panned out. Justin Zwick, who had the great misfortune of coming into the same class as Troy Smith, so he didn't pan out. And then Maurice Claret, who panned out until he didn't. And then my favorite was 2000, 2 5-star offensive linemen in the state. Mike Munoz, who went to Tennessee, and Antonio Hall, who went to Kentucky. So if you think that they've had bad misses in recent years with anyone, imagine losing a 5-star in-state kid to Kentucky. That I don't think that would go over all that well now.
And remember, he went there because of Kentucky's music school, but I don't think he was even into bluegrass.
Seems like a bad fit there.
The last 3 5-star offensive linemen in Ohio, I believe, have all gone out of state. Because you had Jackson Carman last year. You had Tommy Kramer out of Cincinnati in 2016, went to Notre Dame. And Kyle Kalis was 2012, went to Michigan.
He was a 5-star on one of the surfaces, but not on the composite. He was a 4-star on the composite. Yeah.
Which congrats on that composite getting that correct. Although maybe even 4 stars might be too many. I don't know.
Little generous.
Speaking of 5-star offensive linemen, the state of Michigan has 2 5-star offensive linemen in the 2019 class. One of them has been committed to Wisconsin since November. The other, Devontae Dobbs, just released his top 8 this past week, and Michigan was not on it. So, we're talking about Antonio Hall way back when leaving the state as a 5-star guy and all these other 5-star offensive linemen. You've got 2 in Michigan who are most likely not going to end up as Wolverines. You look at Devontae Dobbs, number 10 player in the nation, number 3 offensive lineman, offensive tackle in the nation, with OSU, Michigan State, USC, Auburn, Clemson, Georgia, Florida State, and Oklahoma on his list. And I'm looking at this, and the other guy is Logan Brown, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is the Ed Warner effect already in motion, but this has gone on before Ed Warner got there. Ed Warner, we've talked about here before, is not the best recruiter, but Logan Brown was committed to Wisconsin before Warner ever got there, and for some reason, Devontae Dobbs, Tom, he just doesn't like Michigan.
Well, you got to think about this. He is graduating high school in 2019. That means he was in kindergarten back in the fall of 2006. Kindergarten. So that was the last time Michigan made any kind of a serious run at a Big Ten championship, and he was in kindergarten. I mean, he was probably in diapers the last time they won the league. So growing up, I mean, I think people who are in their late 30s have this, remember when Michigan was nationally relevant, and that is a thing that people remember. The same way that you remember, hey, Nebraska, what used to be a national powerhouse. For Devontae Dobbs, Michigan has been bad his whole life. He has Michigan State ahead of them, and I think, if you have a long enough memory, you think, boy, that's crazy. Why would anyone have Michigan State ahead of Michigan? In the time that he's been paying attention and cognizant of football, Michigan State's been a better program than Michigan. Michigan State beaten him 8 out of 10 years or whatever it is. Ohio State's beaten him 9 out of the last 10 years. If you look at the time that the current recruits have been paying attention to football, yeah, you wouldn't have Michigan in your top list because Michigan has been the crappy team that goes to the Outback Bowl and loses to South Carolina, or goes to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl and loses to Kansas State. None of these guys remember Michigan going to the Rose Bowl because it hasn't happened since they were little tiny kids. So, it's crazy to think this, but it makes sense that in-state kids are not paying attention to Michigan because it's not like Michigan's cranking out a ton of, first-round NFL draft picks off the line either. They've had some good players there, and they've put some guys in the NFL, but it's not like, Ohio State and defensive backs where it's like, well, you have to go here because they're going to make you a first-round draft pick. It's, yeah, you'll go here and, you'll win 8-9 games a year, and, some of you will make the league and some of you won't, but that's not that compelling a sales point if you're comparing it to Michigan State, who's gone to the Rose Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, and Ohio State, who's won a national championship recently and played in a bunch of New Year's Six games. And Wisconsin, if you're old enough, you remember Wisconsin was a joke in the 80s, and when Michigan was the big regional powerhouse. And none of these kids remember that. None of these kids. Wisconsin has been a good top 10 program as long as these kids can remember, and that's. When you're 18, that
Wisconsin was playing for a playoff berth just last year. Michigan State has been there. Ohio State has been there. Michigan has not even yet been to a Big Ten championship game. So there's the thing that I was thinking about this. I think we were even last week. It's interesting to me that Miami, the U, can withstand being nothing for so long, but kids down there still know the U and they still respect the brand. But there's really not the same thing. I don't know if it's the region or what, but Michigan's brand, yeah, it has respect, but even if this kid like Dobbs or Logan Brown aren't growing up seeing Michigan as this elite program, it should still sort of be part of should be inculcated in their region, their growing up, but it's not, and it's pretty crazy. Do you know Logan Brown committed on November 19th of last year? Do you know what happened on November 18th?
I'm going to guess that was the day that Wisconsin beat Michigan. That would be right around then, right?
Exactly correct. And he was, I don't even know if he was visiting, but I mean, it's pretty funny. I shouldn't say funny, just, I guess, fitting or not coincidental that when you're choosing, I'm going to assume Michigan was in the mix just because you have to, but the day after Michigan loses 24-10 to Wisconsin, then he's like, yeah, I want to be a Badger. And you really can't fault offensive linemen for wanting to go to Wisconsin, although he has the least Wisconsin offensive line name ever, like Logan Brown. It's like that's easy to pronounce, easy to spell. There are literally no Z's anywhere in it. There's no Shoeskis or Dowskis or DeWitzes. So I don't know if he's going to be that good.
Maybe they'll give him, Brown and just put a CZ on the end of his name, just Brown Zzz, just to make him fit in. The funny thing about that is that Michigan having 2 5-stars in the state and both of them going elsewhere, or very likely going elsewhere. I mean, we went through the Ohio the 5-star list not that long ago, and it's like probably an average of, I don't know, 1.5 kids per year for the last 15 years. Michigan produces far fewer 5-stars. This is a really rare thing for Michigan to have 2 5-stars in state, especially at a pretty important position like offensive line. To miss out on both of those, that's like even more cataclysmic than if Ohio State missed out on 2 5-star in state, because that's something that give it another year and Ohio is going to produce another 5-star or another 2 5-stars. Michigan does not. Just the high school football is not as there's not as many kids up there. The football is probably not quite as good up there, so they don't produce that level of talent as often. So if you miss out on this kind of once in a generation class, you go 0 for 2 in state. That is a real disaster for them.
Was Robert Bolden, was he a 5-star kid was he out of Michigan as well? The quarterback went to Penn State, because he also was Devin Gardner maybe that same year, and they were both 5-star kids. And since Michigan could only take one, that's why Bolden got out of state. I may be completely wrong on that, but I was just thinking of other 5-star Michigan kids. But the Ohio, I wrote a piece on Tuesday that from 2002 to 2011, those 10 years, there were 23 5-star kids named by at least one of the services. And so that's 2.3 a year. Once Urban Meyer took over from 2012 to 2018, there's been, I think, 11. So, whatever the number was, 8 maybe. Basically from 2.3 per year to 1.1 per year for Urban Meyer. So, that has cut down. That makes a guy like Zach Harrison even more important, just like these two guys are more important for Michigan, because there's not 25 kids from the state of Michigan who are good enough to play at Michigan. There may only be 6 or 8, and if you're missing the top 2, your foundation takes a huge hit, and now you've got to go elsewhere. But as we've seen with Jim Harbaugh's recruiting, he's okay going elsewhere, but we need to start seeing some production from those guys. You go get somebody from Connecticut, that's fine. Urban Meyer does it as well. But if he's the 837th ranked player, people are going to raise their eyebrows, and we talked about that last week with the ongoing battle between Michigan fans and Michigan recruiting. So you wonder if they could get back into it with Logan Brown, but it seems like maybe that ship has sailed, and there is no ship to even board for Devontae Dobbs at this point. So that's 2 huge misses for Michigan, if you like to hear that sort of thing. But it's also, Tom, although Dobbs is favored to go to Michigan State, but that's a guy that they need to get.
Well, Michigan State is that's a team that has kind of lived and died with its line play the last few years on offense, because they don't get the really top level skill talent there. They don't have the 5-star quarterback or the 5-star running back generally. They're getting kind of the second tier Ohio kids. They're getting LJ Scott, who Ohio State pretty much passed on. Or you're getting, the sort of second tier Ohio skill players. So you have to kind of be able to make your bones up front. And they've done a great job developing offensive linemen over the years, which has really been kind of the key to getting them to making that offense go for the last decade or so. But yeah, I mean, if Michigan State loses out on Devontae Dobbs too, I mean, he has been considered a Michigan State lean for a long time, but Ohio State is still very much a part of that recruitment, it seems like. So, if both Michigan and Michigan State miss out on both of those guys and lose both of them to other Big Ten programs, I mean, that's a pretty serious blow, because neither Michigan nor Michigan State has a huge margin for error right now. They're both, Ohio State and Penn State, if you look at the recruiting rankings year by year, Ohio State and Penn State have clearly separated themselves from the rest of the Big Ten. So you can't, if you're Michigan and you're Michigan State and you have to play those two teams every year, you need to grab those 5-star in-state kids when you have a chance to get them, because they don't come around very often, and that's a very rare chance for you to kind of make up some ground.
Yeah, the best news for Michigan and Michigan State is that Dobbs has no interest apparently in Penn State. So that's a win. Good job. And it's not going to get any better. We know Michigan State, when they recruit, it's about development. And we saw with the recruiting class they had after the playoffs, they flew a little too close to the sun, and you saw what happened with all of these guys, these high 4-star guys that didn't turn out to be the characters that they wanted. And so I wonder if Michigan State has maybe gone back to their roots of development, and although I can't say character because they've had plenty of players with issues, but they know their role, they know their lane, and I think they're more capable of missing out on Dobbs or handling it because that's what they're used to. So they'll find a way, and they'll have a 4th-year junior ready to play because they develop guys and it takes them a while. But Penn State, I don't know when this is going to slow down for them. This is a job that James Franklin could stay in forever. And if he does, and recruiting stays where it is, because remember, Joe Paterno, for, I don't know, maybe his last 10, 15 years, didn't bother recruiting in Florida. James Franklin will go down south. And now you've got a Penn State program that recruits on the East Coast better than anybody. Recruits in the Midwest. I mean, Zach Harrison might end up at Penn State. And now actually realizes, we could go south as well. So, yeah, there's, the Midwest, the population is declining, but Penn State is now branching out and recruiting in ways that they haven't before, which makes things even more difficult for Michigan and Michigan State in the Big Ten East, and as far as keeping their name, that name brand. Tom, I don't know how much longer the Michigan name brand will be more well known in recruiting circles than Penn State, or even if it is now.
I don't think it is. If you look at the on-field results, if you look at the recruiting results the last 5 years or so, I don't know what you would base it on to say that the Michigan brand is stronger than Penn State. I mean, Penn State they finish ahead of them every year in recruiting. They finish ahead of them every year in the standings. If you go to Michigan Stadium for a big game and you go to Penn State for a big game, it's not really a question where the atmosphere is better. Jim Harbaugh is making more money than James Franklin, so they're ahead of them there, so that's something. But that's about it. So I don't think there's any question that just nationally or in the perception of recruits that Penn State has passed Michigan and almost to the point of lapping them, because Michigan beat them that one 2 years ago. Michigan beat them pretty thoroughly early in the year before Penn State kind of put it all together. But Penn State just beat the brakes off them last fall and has beaten them, I think, semi-consistently, right? I mean, didn't they beat them 3 years ago? I feel like Michigan has beaten them kind of once, and that was kind of the big one in 2016, and that was kind of it, right? I haven't gone back and looked at the series, but am I remembering that right?
That's how I remember it as well. So if we both remember it like that, could it possibly be wrong?
Maybe. Hang on, let me type faster.
Let me vamp.
Speaking of things that I looked up earlier, Rob Bolden and Devin Gardner, according to the 24/7 composite, they were both from Michigan, but they were both 4-star prospects from Michigan. So
they were 5-star on Scout.
Yeah, well, we are both remembering that exactly wrong. Michigan beat Penn State 3 years in a row, 14, 15, 16. And then Penn State won in 17.
So yeah, Penn State does have control now, though. Clearly, that one win.
42-13 was pretty decisive last year.
That the 2016, I think it was like 49-7 or something. It was 49-3. Did James Franklin kick a field goal at the end to not get shut out?
It was 49-10.
49-10. Yeah, that was that was so bad because every play that Penn State ran, it was almost like they were doing it for Michigan's benefit. And all of the reads were slow, and everybody was just in the backfield.
That was a real good year to get Penn State in September instead of October.
Yeah. So now that we've said all that, the Penn State game for Ohio State, the Michigan game is still bigger. But in terms of the Big Ten, Tom, is the Penn State game a more important Big Ten game than the Michigan game?
If you're talking solely for the Big Ten championship, then probably yes. For every other possible, combination of answers, then no. I mean, the Michigan game is the Michigan game, and it will always be the Michigan game. It will always be the most important game on the Ohio State schedule, period, full stop, end of story. It also, in terms of a national title, that Michigan game is more important because you're playing it so much later in the season that, if they lose to Penn State this year in September, but that's their only loss, they can probably overcome that. And, Penn State trips up somewhere along the way, and then Ohio State wins the Big Ten East and goes to the Big Ten championship game and wins it, and they probably make the playoffs at 12-1. You're not. I mean, no one other than Alabama is going to be able to lose that Thanksgiving weekend game to an arch rival and still make the playoffs. Like that's pretty much not going to be possible in almost any circumstance. So in that way, the Michigan game is still more important in the national perspective. And it's still more important in the Ohio State fan zeitgeist, general mental well-being. The Michigan game is always number one, not a question, end of discussion. But in terms of the Big Ten title, then yes. Purely in terms of the Big Ten East title, then yes, it is more likely going to come down to the Ohio State-Penn State winner than the Ohio State-Michigan winner, at least for now.
Yeah, but even in September, I mean, that's pretty early to sew something up. So I'm going to disagree with you and say the Michigan game is bigger.
Hot take, Gerd. Very hot takes. Flames coming out of my computer right
now. You know that there's going to be, and I already know some of the guys who are going to write this, but that the Penn State game is bigger and more important. And there are reasons to think that, but you lose to Michigan and it doesn't matter. I mean, like you said, you can climb back up from the loss to Penn State. You lose to Michigan, and unless that's your only loss, it's close, and if this, but don't get involved with the ifs. You're going to cloud everything. You're going to make everything more difficult for people to I guess, look past your flaws when the thing they see most is the last loss you just had to Michigan at home, mind you. Because a loss at Happy Valley at night in a whiteout, you're supposed to lose that, So if you do something that you're supposed to do, I think it's easier to forgive.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any question that the the Michigan game is the single one that can kill your season more than anything else. I mean, and that's in a national level. That's in a Ohio State general fan sentiment kind of way. You cannot lose that game. That is just, if you lose that game, there are a lot of people that will tell you that if you lose that game, the season is a failure. I don't think anyone looks at Penn State as, if you go 11-1 but you lose to Penn State, the season is a failure. There are people that think that if you go 11-1 and you lose to Michigan, the season is a failure. That is, and if you define the season as a failure, if you don't make the playoffs, then losing to Michigan probably keeps you out of the playoffs. So then it does potentially turn the season into a failure. You were talking about the people who are going to make the argument that Penn State's more important than Michigan, it's a bigger rivalry than Michigan. Those are the same people that were making the argument that Florida State was a bigger rivalry than Ohio State Michigan was, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So, it's whatever the of the moment big thing is, will always, saying the thing that has always been the most important thing is still the most important thing is not exciting. It does not get clicks. So, congratulations. I hope your Florida State is the nation's premier rivalry. I hope you have that framed on your wall, because that game is a huge one every year. And I think I could tell you who won last year. I think Florida State won, didn't they? Maybe. I don't think there is one person listening to this who watched the Florida State game last year. If you watched the Florida State game last year, tweet at me. At Tom Orr 4. Tweet at me if you watched that game live.
And tell us how much you had riding on it.
The biggest rivalry in all of college sports. Tell me if you watched that game last year.
Notre Dame fans believe that the USC Notre Dame game is the biggest rivalry in sports, or at least in college football. Because college football is the only sport, so by default, it would be the biggest rivalry in sports. But there's crazies everywhere, Tom.
I was just about to launch into a thing about how delusional Notre Dame fans were, but if they say that college football is the only sport, I'm kind of with them there. So in that way, they're not crazy.
But you are a Mets fan, so.
Yeah, you know what? I'm right about to the point of just not acknowledging the existence of baseball anymore. So I think that's going to do wonders for my mental health this summer. So maybe college football is the only thing.
Is it May already? So
for a team that started 12-1, they sure are out of the pennant race awful quickly, aren't they?
It's hilarious. It is. So in 4 years, give me the Big Ten East hierarchy. I'm going Ohio State, Penn State, and you can toss up between Michigan State for me.
That's exactly what I have. Ohio State 1, Penn State 2, Michigan and Michigan State
just depends.
3 and 3A. Yeah. And the wild card there is DJ Durkin in Maryland. Does DJ Durkin stay at Maryland? And can DJ Durkin take advantage of that recruiting area he's got? Because, you were talking earlier about places that Penn State has sort of started to expand their recruiting reach. They've hit that DMV area pretty hard. That's been kind of historically a pretty good area for them, going back to when Larry Johnson was a coach there. But they have hit, they got Rasheed Walker, the offensive lineman out of Virginia this time, this year, a guy Ohio State really wanted. They have hit that Maryland, Virginia area, DC area pretty hard. But if Maryland can sort of start to reclaim that, DJ Durkin has had sort of a promising-ish start if he can keep his quarterbacks alive. You could tell me that Maryland snuck into that 4 spot 4 years from now, and I wouldn't be totally shocked. The bigger question to me, and really maybe this is what determines that order, is of those 5 coaches, who's still there in 4 years? Urban Meyer, James Franklin, Jim Harbaugh, Mark D'Antonio, DJ Durkin. What's the over-under on the number of coaches that are still there? 3.5?
Yeah, because you either got to go with 3 or 4. I believe 3 of them will be there for sure. In Franklin, Meyer, and D'Antonio, because I believe Penn State is a place that you can retire from. And James Franklin is from the area. He's from Pennsylvania.
Willingly or not, you can retire from it. Yes,
but even after 60 years. Now, Durkin,
I'm right. I'm right with you there. Urban is probably there in 4 years. Franklin is probably there in 4 years unless he gets some kind of crazy NFL hankering somewhere. I mean, I think I would say he's 75 or 80% chance that he's still there in 4 years. Myers at least that high. D'Antonio probably is there. D'Antonio's not going anywhere else, but he's had some health issues, so maybe he retires related to those. But yeah, I mean, Harbaugh, I mean, how confident, I mean, deep down, how confident are Michigan fans that Jim Harbaugh's not coaching in the NFL in 4 years? I mean, like, really, gun to your head, how confident are they that he's not coaching in the NFL in 4 years? Because I wouldn't say that's better than 50-50.
You know, watching All or Nothing and just seeing how distant and distraught he is after losses, you wonder how long he wants to do that at Michigan. But you're going to lose more in the NFL just because of the number of games you play. But a loss doesn't mean as much in the NFL. And I wonder in college if it takes more out of him. I think it has to take more out of him. But you can't lose 2 games or else now the season is a failure almost. Whereas in the NFL, you can lose 5, 6, 7, and if you do something in the playoffs, you're a wild card team and you go to the Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game, it's a complete success. But you just lost 7 or 8 times in a season. I wonder just how long. And I never had any doubts about him at Michigan in terms of longevity until watching All or Nothing. And so maybe I'm just falling victim to the selective editing and seeing him immediately after a loss, and maybe that's how all coaches are. I'm sure Urban Meyer is similar, but he's not losing as much as Jim Harbaugh, so it's probably easier for him to handle. And the Lindy's or the Athlon magazine came out, and they always have like blurbs from other conference assistant coaches or head coaches, and they don't tell you who they are. But one of them, remarked about Urban Meyer how every loss is like somebody died. And I guess that's okay as long as you don't lose too much. But if you're losing 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, that's going to get old real quick. And well, not real quick, but it eventually gets old. And if it happens a couple years in a row, then you just might want to just move on. But yeah, I don't see him as a type that would just move on to move on. I think there would have to be more than just, well, I'm tired of losing.
The next interesting question is, if he does move on and DJ Durkin is doing well at Maryland, is DJ Durkin the next head coach at Michigan?
Yes.
I think there's a pretty good chance that's if Durkin can get them to like a 9-win team at Maryland, I think there's a decent chance that he, if Harbaugh lasts another couple of years and then goes and coaches the Colts or something, and Durkin's got Maryland winning, going 9-4, something like that, I think there's a pretty good chance he's the next guy there.
I want another year or so before asking this, or I'll ask you now before I have to answer it. Do you think DJ Durkin would have Michigan further or farther in 4 years than Jim Harbaugh?
No. I think at this point, until I see otherwise, I think there are institutional limits there, just based on where you are.
No, I'm sorry, DJ Durkin at Michigan.
Yes, yeah, no, I know. I'm thinking. I think until I see otherwise, I think I'm assuming that there is sort of a cap on that program at about 10-2, and show me otherwise. You're going to have the one season where you go 11-1, and like Michigan State, where Michigan State went 11-1 the one year, and that doesn't mean that Michigan State is an 11-1 program. That just means that Michigan State went 11-1 one year. I don't know who, unless Urban Meyer jumps to Michigan or Nick Saban jumps to Michigan, like I don't know who Michigan gets that turns them into an 11-1, 12-0 consistent program like Ohio State is. I don't know who that coach is, because I would have said it was Jim Harbaugh, maybe. I mean, he certainly seems like the most likely coach alive to be able to do that, and we're 3 years in, and he doesn't seem like he's getting them there. I mean, they had a very good year in 2016, but they came up short, and then they fell on their butts last year. They have, this year they've got a talented team, but a schedule that they're going to say the schedule kept them from getting there. And then the year after that, they're going to lose players. And, and like we said, there is a whole generation of kids who are about to be college football players for whom this is what Michigan is. Michigan is the team that goes to the Outback Bowl. And yeah, they've got a big stadium, but they're not the team that ever plays in the Big Ten championship game. They're not the team that's ever waiting nervously on college football playoff selection day. They're just, they're fine. Like they're how you thought of Iowa in the 1990s, or, maybe Michigan State in the late 90s under Nick Saban, something like that, or Bobby Williams. But they're not a national championship contender. So, I mean, until proven otherwise, you are what your record says you are. And right now, the record says that no one is going to get them to 12-0 consistently, 11-1 consistently.
Let's talk this out. Say the Big Ten head coaches were all available to be drafted by a Big Ten team, be it Michigan or whatever. The first pick is Urban. Second pick, would we agree, James Franklin?
Yes.
And then third, is it Harbaugh? Is it, depending on maybe the school, is it Scott Frost? I know some people like Pat Fitzgerald. Mark D'Antonio has production that nobody else outside of the first two guys we mentioned can say. Where does Jim Harbaugh fall in this draft process? Because when you're saying Harbaugh would have Michigan tapped out at like 10-2, I wonder if Scott Frost couldn't do better than that. And again, it's where you want more info. I need more time on these guys, but I'm kind of all in on Scott Frost. Like, to me, I think he's Urban Meyer 2.0 in terms of the guy is just completely focused. He's next level. What he brings to college football, people will be trying to copy and learn from what he's going to do. But is Jim Harbaugh, is he the number 3, number 4? Where do you slot him in that draft, in your mock draft?
If we're drafting for just most likely to get us to 9 wins, I probably go Harbaugh, probably. But if you're drafting for high ceiling, if you're drafting for our goal is to win a national championship in the next 10 years, then it's 100% Scott Frost. And it might be Scott Frost ahead of James Franklin. There is a big delta there. Like, there's a wider range of possible outcomes. It's possible he just falls on his ass at Nebraska. That's possible. But I think there's a pretty good chance he does pretty well there. I don't know if it's national championship, because you've got, we talked about institutional limitations at Michigan. You've got real serious institutional limitations at Nebraska, where there's basically no in-state recruiting base, and you're recruiting from everywhere else in a lot of states that you don't have in your conference anymore. You're recruiting from Texas, and you don't play anyone in Texas. You're recruiting from California, you don't play anyone in California. So there are some real serious institutional limitations there. But if you tell me I'm an athletic director and my goal is to win a national championship in the next 10 years, it's Urban Meyer 1, and then I'm debating on James Franklin or Scott Frost number 2.
Here's something for you. I don't know if this is a hot take. Paul Chryst could do what Jim Harbaugh is doing at Michigan, like for Michigan. I don't see there being much difference between the two in terms of production. I think Paul Chryst would do the same thing that Jim Harbaugh is doing, and maybe I can't say better because it's a different division than what he's doing in Wisconsin, but I don't see a big difference between the two in terms of what they would get out of Michigan.
it's a different division, but the amount of resources you work with at Michigan is night and day from what you have at Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin very famously is incredibly cheap with their assistant coach hiring salary pool. That's one of the reasons Bielema left. That's one of the reasons Gary Anderson left. That is a hard job in some ways. It's an easy job because you're in the West. It's going to get a lot harder once Scott Frost gets Nebraska cranked up again. But yeah, I mean, Paul Chryst is someone that I would pick him somewhere in the middle of the pack if you're asking me most likely to win the national championship in the next 10 years. But, I think you said that was a hot take. I don't know how hot that was. That's one of those things. The more you think about it, the more it's like, yeah, that's about right. I mean, he almost got him into the playoff last year, coming a touchdown short against Ohio State, and almost got him in the playoff the year before that against Penn State. They blew a big lead in the second half. I mean, that's not an unreasonable take there. I think that's actually shockingly close, and the longer we talk, the more I'm thinking I might pick Chryst over Harbaugh.
Oh, now you've done it. I give
if you're a Michigan fan who didn't like that, at me, I'm at Tony Gerdeman, Gerdeman on Twitter.
Thanks for the shout out.
I'm sorry, I misspelled that. It's at Shannon CFB. That's my Twitter handle.
DMs are open. Jeff Brown, I don't know how long he'll be at Purdue. He had a chance to leave probably this past year, but he stayed. But I'm pretty excited about 2-3 years down the road, Scott Frost against Paul Chryst, because those could be almost quarterfinal playoff games, because those two teams, I think, could be vying for a spot in the Big Ten championship game, which could essentially be, I guess that would be the quarterfinal, but whatever. The Elite Eight, where it's basically a mini playoff game between those two. If they get, Chryst is already there, but if Scott Frost gets Nebraska where we think he will, that's going to be, everybody talks about the Big Ten East and Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, Michigan State. Nebraska and Wisconsin, I think, is something to watch down the road.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Barry Alvarez, when he got to Wisconsin in the late 80s, modeled his program after Nebraska. That was his, Tom Osborne's Nebraska. That was what he modeled his, when he was building the program at Wisconsin, that's what he modeled it after. The in-state walk-on program and in-state offensive linemen and all that kind of stuff and pounding the ball. That was his model for what he wanted the Wisconsin program to be. Because before Barry Alvarez got there, that program was 1-10. That was a 1-win, 2-win kind of program a lot of years. So, if you're in your mid-30s or younger, Wisconsin has just been good your whole life. But before that, they were really, really awful. And Barry Alvarez used the Nebraska model to build that Wisconsin program into what it is today. So it'd be funny if now Wisconsin and Nebraska are once again kind of the ones who are fighting it out in that Western Division.
Yeah, so that was a pretty good 20 minutes of something that we didn't even have in the rundown. So we are never going to have a 45-minute show.
You predicted a 52-minute show right now, and I started my recording a little before we actually started talking, but I'm already past 52 minutes.
Yeah, I'm at 53, so I'm sorry about that. But good night, everybody.
Listeners, what we lack in quality, we make up for in quantity. So you're welcome.
Yeah, and all of this talk about where the programs are now leads into the next topic, which is the betting lines. The South Point Sportsbook came out with their games of the year lines, and which would be Ohio State against TCU, Ohio State, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan, and all of the other big games. And Ohio State opened as a 12-point favorite against TCU. They go 1.5-point favorite against Penn State. I think, Tom, were they is it a 6-point favorite against Michigan State and then a 9-point favorite against Michigan? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes, I believe that's correct.
Anything stand out to you? I thought the at Penn State being 1.5 point favorite. I wonder if they're just trying to. Obviously, they want to get some money put on that, but I was a little bit surprised by that, given the amount of, I guess, attention and hype that Penn State is getting, and the fact that Ohio State is losing their quarterback. But I don't know that nationally that's seen as such a bad thing.
Yeah, and I mean the other question there is, I mean Penn State lost Saquon Barkley, which is obviously a fantastic player. The bigger question, I think, to me with Penn State this year is Joe Moorhead. Like you lost the guy who revamped your offense and turned your offense into a really strong modern offense. So your inclination is to say, well, yeah, but I mean they've got all the other assistants there, so they'll just be able to kind of keep it going. But you had a lot of Tom Herman's assistants there in 2015, and you saw what happened at Ohio State when he left. So that's a little bit of a question to me. I of all the lines, there were a couple that seemed a little high, like OSU minus 12 against TCU. That seems maybe a little high. I think that Ohio State's probably a little conservative in that game, probably. And like a 24-13 kind of game is about where I would have that pegged, 27-17, something like that. So minus 12 there seems a little high. OSU giving 9 against Michigan is probably a little high, but that one's hard because you're so far out right now that if you played the game today, I would say OSU minus 9 against Michigan is too high, but OSU has so much more depth that by the time you get to late November, injuries and attrition, that OSU depth could really make a difference, and then maybe 9 doesn't seem so high then.
Do you think Dwayne Haskins is more likely to be a September Heisman winner than Shea Patterson? Because we talked about that a lot with Michigan, but Dwayne Haskins could really be the guy this year because he's going to come out of nowhere, pretty much, new starter. If they put up some numbers, because that TCU game is the biggest game, and if he does it there, he could steal that thing from Shea Patterson.
He could, but I think they're going to be pretty conservative with him. I think that's a pretty good TCU defense. Gary Patterson generally runs out a pretty good defense for TCU, so I don't think Ohio State's going to go too crazy there. It wouldn't shock me if they did kind of what they did in the Cotton Bowl last year, where you get a lead and you kind of shut it down, and you just don't want to lose it basically because you're relying on your defense. Because I don't think TCU is going to score a whole bunch of points on the Ohio State defense. So I think Ohio State might play it pretty conservatively with him in that TCU game. And then other than that, you've got Oregon State and Rutgers and Tulane, and no one gives a crap about what you do against any of those teams. I don't think you've got Haskins as a real September Heisman person until, potentially they go into Penn State. If he puts up a big game against Penn State in Happy Valley, in a whiteout, primetime, that's when you maybe get that September Heisman kind of campaign fired up. I don't think the TCU game will do it.
I would love to see September Heisman campaign like from the OSU SID department and just embrace it. Like other schools have embrace it like UCF embraced their national championship. Another thing that I liked was Michigan is a 3-point favorite at home against Wisconsin. But the very next week, they're then a 1-point underdog at Michigan State. And I wonder if they would be favored against the Spartans if that game wasn't the week after getting beaten up by Wisconsin. Because Ohio State players will tell you that after a Wisconsin game, you're beaten, you're tired, you're sore, and it takes stuff out of you. So I wonder if they would be favored if this was in, say, September or November instead of the week right after the Badgers.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I looked at that and thought, oh man, they're underdogs to Michigan State and Ohio State again this year. If he loses to both of them again, God help him if he loses to both of them again this year. I hadn't thought about that, the Wisconsin effect the week before that. Yeah, that's potentially pretty dicey for them because there are teams, I mean, that's like playing one of those service academy teams. Like you don't want to play Navy the week before you play, someone else, or Stanford the week before you play someone else, because you do get kind of battered and bruised, and that was kind of a thing with some of those early Brett Bielema teams at Arkansas too, that they're just going to beat on you, and there's sort of a hangover effect after that. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that could be that could. I mean, that's not going to move the line a field goal or something, but that could move the line a point or two.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe all it would, but that's all it takes to put that 1 point favorite. The Nebraska at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a 17-point favorite there, and this will be where my guy Scott Frost alerts the nation that there'll be nobody's whipping boy, especially the Stinking Badgers. Anything else from the lines, Tom, before we move on to Tate Martell?
I thought Michigan giving 3.5 at home against Penn State was interesting. I would, if I was to lay money on that right now, I would probably take those points. I mean, 3.5 points for Penn State they're going to be pretty good this year, and I think you're making some assumptions to say Michigan is clearly better. I mean, that is 3.5 points is saying Michigan is a better team on a neutral field. I mean, like a half a point better team, but that's I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that. I would probably take Penn State plus 3.5, even in Ann Arbor.
That's going to be a fun one. I hopefully that the clock and the schedule works out that we get to see that one. Sort of in the same vein of Michigan, this week, just a day or two ago, Tate Martell tweeted out he's out doing some quarterback clinic, and Shea Patterson is out there too, Michigan's savior. And Tom, these guys are apparently friends, and I think it's okay now, but can you be a Wolverine killer if you have an emotional attachment to a Wolverine? It's like, can you club baby seals if you've got a seal at home? And is this okay?
You had such a smooth transition there from the September Heisman conversation to the Shea Patterson story, and you didn't take it. I'm a little disappointed.
No.
I do like the analogy of the Ohio State Michigan series being clubbing baby seals, which is, I mean, basically been it the last few years. I was on those pictures that Martell posted on Instagram. I didn't see too many comments that were hashtag traitor, like TRADER, like you've betrayed your team, which is good. So congratulations to everyone on their spelling improvement. That was good. I mean, in reality, this is one of these realities of high level sports, where all these guys go to these Elite 11 camps together, and they all go to the opening together, and so a lot of these guys know each other just from high school, and they're just friends, and that's a pretty common thing, I think, for guys who are sort of high level guys at the same position to talk behind the scenes and to sort of be friends behind the scenes and to sort of shoot the breeze behind the scenes. So yeah, that if you are thinking you should be offended by that, that's probably a lot more common than you think it is.
I didn't see no pictures of Troy Smith and Chad Henne hanging out.
It's because no one's ever friends with Chad Henne. Come on.
Okay. All right. We're going to have a 2-hour show because now it's time for All or Nothing.
Yes.
And Tom,
the best episode of the season. Yes.
And so this episode is episode 6. There's one episode to go, but this had Wisconsin and Ohio State. So I don't know what else there is to watch next week. I don't care about the bowl game. I mean, this pretty much was it. And then next week is like the epilogue and blah blah blah. It's like this one started out right away. And I had to write this one down because it's before the Wisconsin game, and it's a big game. And Jim Harbaugh
is this something Jim Harbaugh says? I bet we have the same thing written down again. I'm excited. Go ahead, you first.
This is the week that the football world will be reintroduced to the 2017 Michigan football team. And
Ron Howard narrator voice, and it was.
And they were reintroduced, and it was the same team from a couple weeks before when they were getting beat again.
We played some crappy teams for 3 weeks, but this week we're back on the big stage. We're going to show them what we're made of. We're going to lose by 3 touchdowns.
And he was right. This episode, though, we talked last week about we want more Don Brown and John O'Corn. This is a lot of Don Brown and John O'Corn, but not together, which is still what we really want.
Right.
But we got to see Don Brown at home, which was calm. Although, he looked like at some points like he just needs to be left alone with his thoughts. And he's sitting there in his recliner, like in front of a fireplace where most people have like their television or whatever. It's just 2 recliners pointed, 2 feet away from a fireplace for him and his wife, where he can just think of things to yell, I guess. I don't know.
I was so excited. We talked last week. In case you're one of those terrible, disloyal people who did not listen to last week's show, we talked about a Don Brown, John O'Corn, kind of like a buddy cop show or like a detective show where they go around and solve mysteries together. And then in this episode, Don Brown is driving his car, and at night, and you have the shot from the passenger seat, like the sort of side profile shot of Don Brown as he's driving, and it looked like a shot from like every cop movie where the cop is driving at night. It was pretty exciting. It was like if we were to cut a trailer together for that show and make it do a buddy cop show, like I would absolutely use that shot in there, because that was straight out of the show that I think we want to be producing and casting. Have you come up with a name for that? Have you come up with a name for that show, by the way?
Not yet, but
our listeners have really disappointed me. We didn't get any good suggestions on the name.
What we also need is like a stakeout shot of him in the car with like coffee cups and coffee lids on the dash.
Sitting there, what would he be staking out? Staking out to see if players are going to class, or
I think he could just be staking out like anything. Are people parking in the Walmart parking lot properly? Are they driving through the white lines? Is this person taking up 2 spots and then just acting on it, and citizens arresting and putting people on the ground?
Or just, since their big catchphrase is smash, maybe he just just T-bones his car into people if they park across the line. Smash!
There you go. That's how you park. I was thinking watching this, you know how the defensive coordinators in the SEC change schools for more money here? They can go from Georgia to Alabama to Tennessee. They don't care. I can't see Don Brown leaving Michigan to go to, we've talked about before about, going to Ohio State. I can't see him leaving for a big payday, because he's too grandpa-like to do that to me.
He definitely gives off the I've got 2 weeks to retirement kind of vibe in some ways. Sticking with the sort of cop show theme. Yeah, he I think, sadly, at this point, is a Michigan lifer. I would absolutely love to have him here. If Greg Schiano leaves, just throw $2 million a year at Don Brown just purely for my entertainment. That would, I think, be fantastic. But yeah, I don't think he's. I think he's probably settled where he is, and that's where he's going to stay. Unless Harbaugh leaves, and then who knows? Maybe something crazy happens.
So then they get to the Wisconsin game, and I don't know if you've noticed this one, Tom, but Chase Winovich is probably the most unfortunate trash talker in the nation, because half the time he does it, something bad happens to Michigan. And in this one, there was at one point he told the Wisconsin offensive line to protect their quarterback. And I think then maybe the next then it's almost like due to time constraints. Like the very next sentence is from Mark Harmon, the narrator. Wisconsin would go on to score their next drive.
Due to time constraints, we moved ahead to the next time Michigan gets dunked on defense.
But he's a constant talker as well. I think he maybe toned it down some later in the year, but don't tell Wisconsin, the offensive line, to protect their quarterback. Don't poke the Badger.
Don't remind them. Don't
Oh, yeah.
don't remind them what their job is, because then they'll remember. Oh, right, I couldn't remember what we're supposed to do out here. Thank you. The funny thing is Michigan was not able to protect its quarterback later in that game, and so Brandon Peters goes down with an injury, gets knocked out, and they should go to a shot of Pep Hamilton up in the booth, and John O'Corn's coming in, and he goes, "We've got John in," and he just sort of like trails off, like, "We've got John in." Yeah, okay. Like, boy, that wasn't a very excited tone you used there, Pep. That was not the yes, John O'Corn's coming back in the game.
Yeah, it was Coach, John's good. He's played before. Still got to attack. It's like, well, we still got to keep playing. We got to keep going. We can't just quit. And poor Pep, he looked so defeated. Like, they all knew it. Like, oh, we were moving the ball.
Yeah.
Things are going well. And then you try to talk it up. And, hey, Coach, he's played football before. I mean, he knows what the sport means. He saw it on the Wikipedia page.
He doesn't try and grab the football like by the pointy end and like fling it overhand. So I mean, that's something.
He's a one-handed thrower.
He doesn't do the Dr. Pepper two-hand chest pass, the tuition scholarship pass.
Although maybe he should.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe he should try. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that didn't go so well. Michigan loses that game. I think it was afterwards. I'm looking at and we can go back to the Wisconsin game if you want. Looking at these players in the meeting rooms or in post-game rooms, they look like they were ready for last season to end after that game.
Yeah, I think at that point they knew, like, well, all of our goals are now gone. So now we get to go to Tampa. Like, the most surprising shot was people in the, on the next episode of All or Nothing, there was a shot that showed people looking like excited that they were going to the Outback Bowl. Like, yes, we're going to Tampa to play South Carolina. Yes. Like, really? Is that, I mean, okay. I mean, that's
Tampa. Yeah, Tampa.
Like, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like everyone just sort of knows they're supposed to look excited whenever they have those on. Like the basketball teams that go crazy when they get shown on the NCAA tournament bracket when they're a 1 seed. Like, yeah, you're a 1 seed. You're in. Like, but people know they're supposed to react, so maybe they react. But yeah, that was you're going back to your point. Yeah, I mean, after that Wisconsin game, it was just like, well, we're dead. We're screwed. Nothing good is going to happen now. So yeah, that was pretty bad. And the narrator, as they're setting up the Ohio State game, like if you're new to college football and just watching this show for the first time, Ohio State and Michigan have played a whole bunch of times in the past, and it's a pretty important rivalry. And the line that I liked best was, lately the matchups have gotten bad for Michigan. Very bad, or very bad. Like, whoa, didn't pull any punches there. That was pretty pointed.
I don't know how else you can sugarcoat it other than saying Michigan has won a couple times in the last 2 decades, and Indiana can't say that.
That's true. Michigan has beaten Ohio State almost as many times as Purdue this century. That's pretty exciting.
Purdue had Drew Brees.
The speech that I didn't understand, and we have the Jim Harbaugh "What are you talking about?" moment of the week.
Like,
we should get this sponsored by someone. Yes, we should get this as a sponsored segment. Like, what are you talking about? Brought to you by Rosetta Stone or something. He talked about how his son was in tears after Wisconsin scored one of the touchdowns, and then talked about how, like, the passion is what made it great. And it's like, he said, how does it get better than this? And it's like, how does it get better than a child crying when you as players have failed to do your job? Like, what? Like, I sort of maybe understand what you're trying to say, but I don't think that's what you were I don't think that's what you were really going for there.
Yeah, the episode of
Congratulations. Who's got it better than us? No one. You made a child cry. Good job.
That was pretty. The episode should have just been titled, "Hey guys, you made my kid cry." I didn't, because I'm gonna assume that's the that's when his son Jack became a meme, and it was posted everywhere on Twitter of him crying. I assume it was that game, but you know what? It wasn't a great season for Michigan, so there could have been other instances of crying. But hey guys, this is the greatest thing ever. You made my son cry. He loves you guys. You guys made him cry. He was really passionate, and boy, did he cry. Did you guys really make him cry? And nothing will pump you up more than that. Now, if Don Brown comes out and he's like, "You guys made my effing kid cry," then that would be all right. You're on the edge of your seat. But when you've got Jim Harbaugh, like, you know what you guys did? You made my kid cry, and I guess that's okay. That's good. But I don't. The guys are just like, let's just. I hope we get to go to Tampa.
The next thing that he said that I thought was weird was he's talking to them about the Ohio State-Michigan game, and he talks about Ohio State the way that you'd envision an Indiana coach talking about Ohio State. I wrote it down. They look down at you. Don't let them do that. Look them right back in the eye. Like they're standing up to a bully or something. Like, what? Like, I am aware of what has happened this century, and that is kind of actually a reflection of the reality of the series at the moment. But still, that was to see that was just really jarring. Like, how far have you fallen that this is how you're looking at this? Like, they think they're better than you. Well, you show them that they're not as much better than you as they think they are.
They're only a little bit better than you. Not as good as they think they are better than you. But yeah, it's to be able to see reality reflected from the Michigan perspective is not something that we've often gotten to see.
And the other thing, speaking of reality being reflected, he says, I think it was Harbaugh. It was either Harbaugh or Pep said, "Nobody I'd rather have at quarterback tomorrow than you, John." And then Maury Povich showed up and said, "The lie detector says that is not true."
Yeah, I wrote that one down too, but I didn't write down who said it. But there's 15 other guys on that team you'd rather have.
At that point, what's Dylan McCaffrey look like? Maybe give that a shot. I don't know. How much worse could it be?
I think it was between the Wisconsin and the Ohio State game where they had Pep shooting baskets at his house with his kids, and he's like, I can't remember the last time I shot hoops, and I'm thinking, well, maybe next time have your producers tell you to shoot hoops with them, weekly in front of the cameras, and then maybe you will.
You don't have to be a good dad. You just have to look like a good dad on TV.
Don Brown telling his defense, you got to put your balls on the table. And then it reminded me, we saw him back at home, and fortunately I didn't picture any of the tables at that point.
Use a coaster in the Brown household, I think, is the moral of the story.
You'll leave a ring. Let me turn to page 2 now. Every pregame after Don Brown, it's like eating sugar-free cereal after just mainlining Frosted Flakes. And then you get Don Brown in there, and then Jim Harbaugh will come up and be like, all right, now football is a game, and it's about who wants it more, and then it's about the football. Now, guys, let's football.
I watched that and I was thinking, do you remember the old, John Cooper used to do General Nealon's 10 principles of football or something like that was his pregame speech for a lot of the Michigan games when they just got killed. And it was I bet that's what it looked like inside that locker room. Just no fire, no intensity, I'm just talking and we're talking about the principles of football and it's, hey, there's a game. Okay, let's football. It's for a guy who is as supposedly intense as Harbaugh is. I don't feel like we've seen that. He gets quietly pissed sometimes, but that's about it. You don't really see. I don't know that we've seen him just go completely ape crap on that team at any point before the game. Even just a punch a hole in a chalkboard because you're excited kind of ape crap. Like he has been disappointingly mellow in a lot of points this year.
Do you think it's because the camera's there?
I don't think so. I mean, I have seen absolutely no indication that he has an ounce of self-awareness at all, so I don't think that a camera being there would have any impact on anything.
Good point. Now, he gets more angrier on the sidelines than we see him anywhere else, and I guess you expect, because it's not like things went great for them last year, so you would expect more fire after games, but it's always, well, that was a missed opportunity, and, losing is tough, but, we got another game next week, and we got to get up to that, and I don't have anything good to say, because if I did, I would have said it the last game, and it would have helped us win, but words are stupid.
I mean, you go back to like the aftermath of that Iowa game and the video Ohio State released of Billy Price in the locker room yelling at the team and talking about how everything they've wanted to play for is still in front of them and they still have a chance to get, to do everything they set out to do. It didn't seem like, I mean, I would assume if someone was giving wonderful, powerful, impassioned speeches on that Michigan team that the cameras would have caught it and the producers would have included it, and it wouldn't just be, here's some more lumpy oatmeal from Jim Harbaugh after the game. So they may just not have had that kind of guy on that team last year. And, not every team has a Billy Price or a JT Barrett who does, kind of takes that role. And, maybe that's one of the things they were missing. Because, I mean, Rashawn Gary does not seem like he's that kind of guy, really. He seems pretty quiet. Devin Bush doesn't really seem like that kind of guy. I don't know who on offense would have Karan Hegden or Chris Evans. Don't really seem like that kind of guy. Like I don't know who on that team really would have been that kind of player for them last year.
And the quarterbacks were all very plastic in their leadership. And Brandon Peters is too young to do it anyway. Buckeye fans made fun of Ohio State having 9 captains last year, but Michigan would have loved to have had 9 leaders like Ohio State had, and they would have had more guys to turn to than what they had. And it's just John O'Korn would try to encourage people, but it's almost like everything ends up in a question mark. Like, come on, guys, we can do this.
Well, it's like having the leader of your baseball team be like your 8th place hitter. Like you have to have, there's a certain amount of, like you have to be kind of good to be a leader. That's just kind of one of the prerequisites, and he did not meet that prerequisite last year. So that was one of the things going against him. And he had Wilton Spate, who was just repeating the script that Pep Hamilton gave him over the phone, during the one of those early games. Got to tell the team we got to go win this game, and hey guys, we got to go win this game. And then, so there's the two of them, and then you've got Brandon Peters, who the show like directly addresses and he's the weird one. Like that is not a great quarterback room.
It's a good thing they have good reception on those phones, because if he's just going to repeat exactly what Pep tells him, you got to get those words correct. You don't want to get the message mixed and then just tell him, like, hey guys, we got to beat those eggs, and the players go, beat the what?
What? Purple Monkey Dishwasher? What?
Okay, let's go, guys. Purple Monkey Dishwasher. So then we finally get to the Ohio State game, and the first thing I've written down is I don't know if it was Rashawn Gary or Mo Hurst, but he said of the offensive line, the Ohio State offensive line, they're scared up front. You can see it in their eyes, and which takes me back to Chase Winovich and how don't talk smack, because it's not worked out well for you this year, and just don't.
I got to tell you, I think that talking any kind of smack to a unit that includes Billy Price would be about the last thing I would do. That's like jumping into a tiger cage and like waving a piece of steak in front of a tiger. Like Billy Price is probably ready to put his head through a cement wall for that game anyway. Like you don't need to get him more riled up. Like that's not a good idea. And it's not like, I mean, it wasn't like they had, a ton of young players out there who probably would have been rattled. Like you've got Isaiah Prince. Isaiah Prince has played in that game before. Billy Price has played in that game before. Michael Jordan has played in that game before. Jamarco Jones has played in that game before. Demetrius Knox is in his 4th year last year. Like it's not like they had young guys who are going to be rattled and up front there. Like that just I heard that and I thought, I think they're trying to talk themselves into something because I don't. That did not seem like an offensive line unit that was going to be scared of anyone last year.
No, and if Billy Price, like you said, hears that, or any of those guys hear that, that's not. It's just foolish. And if they are like afraid, and you somehow think you see that, maybe just tell the guys. Maybe wait till you get back on the sideline and say they're afraid, because there's no positive outcome from anything that they're talking. Winovich, Rashawn Gary, Mo Hurst, none of it worked.
And none of it worked. And it's also, I mean, it's like French people trash talking Germans across the trenches at a war. Like you haven't won in a while. Let's make sure you don't get overrun again before you start sacre-blueing them at.
The Germans are scared. You can see it in their eyes.
The first thing I have written down for this game is Michigan's up, what was it, 14-0, right? 14-0. And Barrett hits Josh Metellus right between the numbers, and he drops it. And it was just like, I mean, at the time, I remember thinking, oh, that was a big play. That was a really big play that they, because I mean, that was like Stanley Jackson hitting Chuck Weathers between the numbers, and Chuck Weathers caught it and ran it back for a touchdown. And Metellus probably could have. I mean, I don't know if someone had an angle on him, but he could have taken that 90-something yards for a touchdown and made it 21-0 and kind of put the game away, and he dropped it, and instead Ohio State scores. And I remember, I mean, they on the show depicted it as like just the air went out of the stadium, and that's pretty much what I remember being there. Like it was just like, it was like one of those Ohio State-Michigan games during the 90s when as soon as the first thing went wrong, every Ohio State fan went, oh, God, here we go. Oh, here we go again. And it was absolutely that they captured that vibe perfectly in that stadium after that Josh Metellus drop. And then Ohio State scores. It goes, instead of 21-0, it's 14-7. And now everyone in Michigan Stadium is going, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, a couple plays later, JT Barrett ran it in from however many yards down the right side. And then I don't know if it was the next drive or what, but it was before JT Barrett hit Marcus Ball for the touchdown to I think tied up. But Mike McCray, even as Ohio State is lining up, he's like, it's coming this way, and it was a fake sweep to Paris Campbell with the play action to Baugh down the seam, and they all went for that fake. And McCray called out the direction of the play even before it had started, and Ohio State played them perfectly on that, because I don't know how long they were setting it up, but everybody went exactly where they wanted them to go because nobody was on Baugh and he walked on in.
That's one of those things that you always, we talk about that a lot, that, you save something for the Michigan game and you're setting things up for the Michigan game. That was really fun to actually get to see that in person, because you could really, I mean, I had that written down as well. Like you could tell, like they had set that up all season. They had established a tendency, and, a lot of times you have quality control coaches to basically self-scout and go, hey, we're doing this a lot. We should probably consider doing something else. Every once in a while, you're doing something like that and you really establish a tendency to set up something else off of it and save it for a really big moment, because the other team has been scouting you and knows the same thing. It's one of those, I know that you know that I know that you know that I'm doing this a lot. And yeah, they set that up perfectly, and it paid off with a big touchdown to Ball there.
And then they go to half. I don't know, did you have anything written down about the halftime speeches, the epicness of them, or anything?
No,
yeah. Me neither.
I mean, the next thing I have is JT Barrett going out.
Well, I have something before that, and that is Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines, looking like he has to pee, like he forgot to pee at halftime, because he's bouncing around like a 6-year-old who really needs to go, and he's making all these odd movements and stuff like that. But then JT Barrett goes down. And we finally, Tom, you and I finally get to see the video that it's been on Twitter and out there ever since this was first released, and all the Ohio State fans immediately went to see what happened during the Ohio State game so that they could laugh and revel. And So then JT Barrett goes down, and the defensive line, the Michigan defense, is talking amongst themselves about who's next. And Tom, what happens?
He says, "Who's their backup?" And one of them says 7. It was Rashawn Gary and someone. I don't know, it was Maurice Hurst or Chase Winovich. There was I think it was Rashawn Gary and someone else. He said, "Who's their backup?" And they said 7. He said, "Oh, we're about to get his ass." Ron Howard narrator voice. They didn't.
No, and Mark Harmon and Tom Brandstetter both called Dwayne Haskins a true freshman, which is even a deeper, knife to the chest for them, thinking it was just some 18-year-old kid coming in and instead of a seasoned redshirt freshman. But yeah, we're going to get his ass. I don't know if it's the next play. He's hitting Austin Mack, and then the play after that is he's running down to the 1-yard line.
Yeah.
So again, stop talking smack.
Stop poking the bear. You are very bad at this.
Even amongst yourselves. You know what? Just be polite to everybody.
Yeah, this doesn't ever seem to work out well for you. You should try something else.
Have you thought about anything else? The only other thing I've written down about this show in this episode is that this was as far from a recruiting tool as Michigan could have gotten. There is nothing about this that should make some 17-year-old be like, "This looks awesome." There's nothing about any of this that looked appealing. Everybody looked miserable all the time.
I mean, everyone looked miserable. The fun off the field stuff was some players went to go have Thanksgiving dinner with Pep Hamilton. Mike McRae is playing Uno with his girlfriend in his apartment. Like, wow, this place looks like a blast. I can't wait to sign up to go play there and lose 5 games a year. Yeah, I mean, I think that they had a very specific vision for this is going to be a really good year. It's going to be 10-2. We're going to be a young team. We're going to build towards a great 2018, and we're really going to have a great showcase. And we're going to go to Italy. It's going to be great. And then they did not get what they wanted to. It did not. They did not live up to their end of the bargain in terms of script development on this show.
They needed somebody to punch it up. You're right.
The last note I had was in the locker room after the Ohio State game. We've got one more game, the bowl game, and I promise you we're not losing that one. Well, I don't want to spoil anything because we're doing that episode next week, but we'll see.
Let's see.
Maybe they'll like CGI the Outback Bowl, the end of the Outback Bowl, and like have O'Korn throwing like 17 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in a glorious win.
Honestly, who would know?
You could do a lot with CGI these days.
Yeah, I mean, who would even know? Like, if you doctored the score from a meaningless bowl game, like, oh yeah, okay, I didn't remember John O'Korn throwing for 475, but anything's possible in Tampa or wherever.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible in Tampa, but that is not possible in Tampa. No.
You can throw for 4 or 75, not 475. Anything else from all of us?
No, I laughed hard enough at that episode in a couple spots that my wife came into the room like, "What are you watching? Like, what are you doing that you were laughing this hard?" It's like, oh, the Michigan show. Okay. Just it never. And I'm gonna once again put out a call for names for our Don Brown, John O'Korn buddy cop comedy series, because the best thing I came up with was Brown Thunder or Brown Lightning, and I really don't like that. I mean, like O'Korn, maybe you call O'Korn White Lightning and it's Don Brown, so it's like Brown Lightning or Brown Thunder, but that sounds like some kind of digestive unrest. So I think we got to workshop that a little further.
I really, really like Brown Thunder.
I mean, that can be our clubhouse leader, but if you can do better than
instead of a helicopter, they go around in a paddle boat, like solving crimes around parks.
like Night Boat from The Simpsons. Every crime is in a canal or an inlet or a fjord.
And he's just yelling at people on shore, and like if they start to run, he yells at them louder. And then John O'Corn will try to throw stuff at him, but then end up hitting like bystanders. And so they're always on suspension from the chief of paddle boat police. And, like, you two renegades, one more outburst from you, Brown, and don't even let me get started on you, O'Corn. I'm taking away your badges and your squirt guns.
Helmets. Give me your helmet, your football. You're suspended.
Give me your life jacket, too. You're not going back out on that boat.
Just promise me that when we make $1 billion from this TV series that we still get to do the podcast, that we're not going to be too good for the podcast. Well, just promise me that.
There's always the Brown Thunder recap show. I think we just got the title of today's show. The Brown Thunder recap show.
There you go. The Brown. And the best part is people have to listen an hour and a half in to figure out what is that? That doesn't make any sense. Nothing on this podcast ever makes sense.
And then they'll be like,
so.
I listened an hour and a half for this. Brown Thunder. I bet there'd be an awesome theme song for that as well. And, cool montages of like John O'Corn running from shore and then sliding across the hood of the paddle boat. And Don Brown, he's already paddling his chubby little legs off as they're chasing somebody else. Like somebody robs a convenience store and jumps in a paddle boat, and they've got a head start on them. And these youngsters, they've got these quick legs, and Don Brown's trying, and John O'Corn gets in there and he's got some extra boost, but it's really hard to catch up. So then they have the grappling hook, which all paddle boats have for the paddle boat police. And so then that's where John O'Corn comes in, and he throws the grappling hook onto the other boat. Unfortunately, the grappling hook lands on the neck of the perp, and then the weight of the hook drags the perp underwater, and then through this paddling, they end up dragging him, and he drowns. But the coroner can't determine whether he drown first, or was it the grappling hook puncturing his jugular? Did he bleed out first? And so there's an inquest. They are totally suspended at that point. In which case, then they start. Maybe that's where the PI comes in, where they become paddle boat PIs.
And I'm just thinking, based on the typical level of excitement of a medical examiner on one of these shows, I think Tim Drevno definitely has to play the medical examiner in this show.
Well, he's dead.
He actually said that during several shows during the actual season as well. Oh, he's dead. Oh, my.
Well,
that's not good.
He probably had several postmortems every week, Here's how we died this week. Couldn't run the ball. Our offensive line got shot. They were mauled by a bear. Trench foot.
The only part of that seemed remotely unrealistic was John O'Corn getting that close to hitting what he was trying to throw the anchor at. He was aiming at the boat and he hit something in the boat. I think he should have, if he was trying to throw it at the bad guy's boat, he definitely would have hit a police boat, because he always hits the wrong team. Whatever he's throwing at, he hits another police paddle boat, drags that down.
Yeah, maybe he was a passerby on a sort of a jet ski, or maybe a parasail, or just a random kid on an inner tube.
Now I've got the image of the two of them in a paddle boat getting dragged behind a jet ski, and Don Brown cursing at him. They're getting the wind whipping through his mustache. Oh man, I want to see this TV show more than any TV show ever in the history of the world.
And they're being pulled backwards. Don Brown is trying his darndest with his little legs, trying to get going forward. I need this to happen. Brown Thunder is the best thing to happen in my life. We're still talking football? Oh.
Allegedly.
You want to go to listener questions, and then we can take the Brown Thunder talk off air?
Sounds good. All right, listener questions. First one is from @Zidaya, Zidaya, if you'd like to follow on the Twitter machines. Who on the defense this year would be good on offense and vice versa? My thoughts: Baron Browning as running back, Jeff Okudah as a wide receiver, Nick Bosa as tight end, Chase Young as left tackle, and Demario McCall as a corner.
I had a little birdie tell me a week or so ago that next year, like after all the receivers leave this year, that Shaun Wade would be more than happy to volunteer his services at wide receiver. I think he'll be too valuable for that, and they've got a bunch of guys coming in this year. But Tom, we've seen his ball skills in his highlights. Like if you go to his huddle page, he's got some ridiculous interceptions. He's got some serious ball skills, and I think that would work well for the Buckeyes. In terms of an offensive guy, I think Paris Campbell could be a big corner, probably like a top 10 pick with his speed and his size, 6'1", 208. And, there was talk early in his career that he might switch over to defense. So those are the two guys I got. Who you got?
I would love to see Chase Young as tight end. I think Chase Young would just absolutely destroy people at tight end. I had Shaun Wade or Jeff Okudah at wide receiver. I think either of them has the size and the speed and the ball skills to probably be pretty good at wide receiver. The one that is kind of an off-the-board selection is Nicholas Petit-Frere as a defensive end, because he is quick. He's got the good feet. He's got pretty good size. I mean, he might be too big to be a defensive end at this point. He might be more of a defensive tackle, like a quick defensive tackle. But he's coming in at 275, 280. I mean, that'd be pretty big for the outside. But maybe he's kind of that, slide him in where that Draymond Jones kind of defensive tackle is, not like the nose like Robert Landers, but slide him in with where Draymond Jones goes, and then throw Draymond Jones. Go have Draymond Jones play tight end. Draymond Jones might present some matchup problems at tight end too.
I mean, he's an athletic dude. Now, speaking of Robert Landers, what about using him the way Michigan uses Khalid Hill in short yardage?
Oh man,
off on the goal line, stuff like that. Because we've seen. He's mostly a long distance runner, but I think he could also do the short yardage stuff.
Robert Landers as a goal line fullback would be. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the Heisman Trophy, which they give to basically the fat guy who makes the best play with the ball. Like, that would just be, don't bother holding a show this year. Just give it to Robert Landers, because Robert Landers as a goal line back would take the nation by storm.
What would his Wildcat package be called?
We've already used Brown Thunder once this show, so unfortunately I'm out of ideas.
And I need to get off of the Brown Thunder because I'm totally distracted by it. What's the next one?
Any update on the center position? Would really love to see Josh Myers win that thing. That's from Dave O.
Yeah, and Tom, as you know, there are no updates on football stuff right now in terms of position or workouts, unless players are tweeting them out themselves like, hey, I'm now number one over Brady Taylor. We're not going to know anything until we talk to Urban Meyer at Big Ten Media Days. And even then, it's like, well, guys, camp doesn't start till next week. How the hell should I know?
Right. Yeah. We're not talking to Urban at this point right now. And even if we did, the last data that we have available on, and that they have available from these guys is the spring game. So nothing has changed since the spring game because there's no new information to make a decision on. So unless someone gets hurt or transfers, everything is pretty much status quo. And, status quo to me right now at the center position is, yeah, it'll be fine. Like, they're happy with Brady Taylor. Josh Myers has, it sounded like, almost caught up with Brady Taylor, so that means they're probably pretty happy with Josh Myers too. So they have two guys there. They both sound like they'll be fine. I don't think that's a huge position of concern right now.
Yeah, but I understand the desire to have Josh Myers win the job. A guy as a redshirt freshman who's going to play more years after this. If he can get his feet wet, really wet, not pedal boat wet, but be a starter this year, then you've got him 2 or 3 more years. That's I always lean towards the younger guys, but I think that's the NCAA football video game person in me. You can cut a redshirt senior even if he's good if you've got a redshirt freshman who's better. Mm-hmm. So I understand the desire for Josh Myers, but Urban Meyer just wants the best guy.
Yeah, I would. The NCAA coach in me definitely wants to see center number 71 playing this year, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
All right, what's the next one?
Next question from Wisconsin area Buckeye. How much does Tate play?
Oh, I'm so tired of talking about Tate Martell and how much he's going to play.
Not me.
Nobody is tired of this.
I guess I'll handle this one then.
Go ahead.
Gerd, who doesn't want to stay on brand. I think the answer on how much does Tate Martell play this fall is more snaps than he probably would have had Joe Burrow not left. He's gonna get more action because they really want to have him ready to be. He is one injury away from being the starting quarterback, so they will want to get him game reps as much as possible. Maybe play the whole second half against Oregon State, maybe play the whole second half against Rutgers and Tulane if they're have comfortable leads in those games. But you're probably going to see fewer designed runs because you can't really risk him getting injured on, getting drilled in the open field on a designed run, because then if he's hurt, then it's Dwayne Haskins and then Matthew Baldwin, who's probably not going to be healthy for the beginning of the year, and then you're down to a walk-on Corey Curtis after that. So they're going to have to kind of keep him sort of protected. Probably can't have him run the ball as much as they probably would have otherwise if Joe Burrow had stayed. But you're probably going to see a good bit of Tate Martell this year, but not, it's going to be a lot more handoffs and short passes and that kind of stuff rather than, Martell keeping it and doing crazy fun things with his feet.
If I say there's let's say a 30% chance that he becomes the red zone quarterback like JT Barrett did in 2015, do you think that is high, that is low? Am I thinking this just because of the 2015 season and the fact that Tim Beck and Ed Warner didn't know how to use a quarterback properly, and this should not even be in our thinking now? Where are you on the possibilities of him being the red zone guy? I don't think it's likely, but is it possible, probable, where?
I wrote the "Is Tate Martell the next Tim Tebow" article,
Yeah.
I don't know, a month and a half ago, something like that. I mean, that's the kind of role that I would have seen him playing, be the, third and short kind of guy, be the goal line kind of guy, where you just, get all your guys blocked up and he's shifty enough to make someone miss in the, in a small confined area. Kind of the way Tim Tebow did. I mean, Tim Tebow did it kind of with brute force in a lot of cases too, but kind of in that same type of role. I think that you're probably going to see less of that than you would have if Burrow was still here. I think that probably would have been his role if Burrow was still here. Now, I think you're probably less likely to see it, but you may. I mean, that is a very logical place for them to try him. So it wouldn't shock me if that's where he kind of fit in at least some of the time this year.
I just really want to see a show where John McCord is throwing grappling hooks.
John, what if wait for it, what if they're cat burglars and he's like throwing grappling hooks up under like the roof of the museum to go in and break in and steal? I mean, Don Brown kind of looks like the cat burglar from The Simpsons. He's got the the
Sure.
gray hair and the mustache and stuff. I mean, and he wears sneakers for sneaking.
You know what would happen though? You have McCord throwing this grappling hook, and he's throwing it for like 20 straight minutes, and the cops are already there. He's still throwing it, trying to get it up there, trying to get it to where it needs to go, and the cops are just like, "We'll give you 4 more shots," and then you're coming with us. Then we're going downtown.
Yeah, I think we can do gritty reboots of this series every season. I mean, like Archer, where they just do like, okay, now it's the Miami Vice season. Okay, now it's the L.A. Noir season. Like, I would be absolutely here for the Brown Thunder Miami Vice season, the Brown Thunder L.A. Noir season. I mean, any of the Brown Thunder breaking into the museum grappling hook heist season. Like, I'm here for all of it.
I like the whole Brown Thunder universe, the multiverse. It's got legs, stubby little legs.
Oh, man.
All right, what's next?
Is JT Barrett the best Buckeye ever who fans are most excited to see replaced? That's from Bobby D.
I was going through the starters, past starters, and I can't find anybody close because the only guys I could think of were like Donnie Nicky, Dustin Fox, basically white defensive backs, and that was nobody comes close that I could find or that I cared to look to JT Barrett because who else is considered great yet the fans want to because I don't know that Fox or Nicky would be considered great. They were 3 or 4 year starters, but Craig Krenzel, no, I mean because they didn't even know who was going to be the quarterback in 2004. It was Zwick and Troy Smith. So I don't know that there's even a close second unless you come up with somebody, Tom.
Yeah, I don't. I wrote down like Todd Beckman, who was, he was not anywhere close to JT Barrett level production. He led him to a national championship game. He was a good, solid quarterback, and everyone was ready to run him out of town on a rail for Terrell Pryor the second that Pryor walked on campus. But I mean, he's not in the same stratosphere as Barrett. A guy we talked about earlier in the show, Antonio Pittman. I mean, people were pretty excited to see Beanie Wells play, and he lost his job, and then I think it was very exciting in 2007 when that was Beanie Wells' job all by himself. But I mean, that's again not the same. I mean, going way back, Rod Gerald for Art Schleister, but Rod Gerald was just okay and was not kind of the same thing. And I had Krenzel and Zwick. I think there was a lot of hype around Justin Zwick, but I mean, again, Krenzel was a good quarterback, but he wasn't. He was not anywhere close to the JT Barrett level. Krenzel for Zwick and Beckman for Pryor are kind of the two those are pretty similar to me, where it's like guys who won a lot of games as quarterback, but weren't like great quarterbacks, and people were super hyped to see the next guy. Those are probably the closest that I can come up with, but yeah, I didn't think there was anything, really remotely close to the JT Barrett thing.
You're right, because even there were people who wanted Zwick in 2003 after Krenzel led Buckeyes to a national title, because it's not like Krenzel did it in a pretty fashion, and we all knew that Justin Zwick, as a 4 or 5 star guy, was capable of throwing lasers and being so much better. And yeah, obviously that never happened. But yeah, that's not a bad one either. What's next?
Okay, so next question from Salt Lake City Buck. Do you guys feel like last season's harsh criticism of Bill Davis was justified?
Oh, Tom. I think it was absolutely justified. I don't know if he was the reason, but since he's the coach, and it was not great linebacker play, and he put those linebackers in a position to play those spots. And I remember before the season wondering who the middle linebacker would be, and I think a lot of people thought it might be Dante Booker, and then start hearing before camp that it's going to be Chris Worley, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, he's experienced, he understands the defense, and sure, but the defense was better when he was not the middle linebacker, and it was tough for him. And then Chris Worley, when he was healthy and back outside, things got better. And Dante Booker was named champion a couple times and player of the game once, but this might just be completely inaccurate. It seemed like they played better when he was not necessarily in the picture.
Yeah, I have my answer for this as cloudy, ask again later. Like I think you have to grade him incomplete for last year because the production wasn't good from the position, and it was his first year, and he came in with some kind of question marks of you've coached in the NFL basically your whole career, so how are you going to adjust to college? And I think those are all very fair questions, but I don't. I think there's potential reason to be concerned given his background. And you didn't really have any reason to feel better after last season, but I think we're going to know a lot more this year. If the linebacker play improves dramatically this year, then maybe it's not a concern with him, and it was just some bad fits last year. But I think it's very similar to the wide receivers, where last year I think the wide receivers, the lack of downfield passing and downfield passing production, can get attributed to the wide receivers, or it can get attributed to JT Barrett. So now JT Barrett's gone, so now you're going to see it's kind of a put up or shut up year for Zach Smith and the wide receivers. I think you're kind of in that boat with Bill Davis too, where you had 1 year, okay, you've had your bad year, that's your freebie. Now you've got to fix it and have a much better year, or maybe it is a Bill Davis issue. But I don't think we have enough evidence right now to make a real definitive statement on that one way or the other.
And it didn't help that people already had doubts about him before the season. And, never recruiting, never really being in college not being in college for a long time. One season as a quality control-ish guy at OSU. Is he just Urban Meyer's crony? You get people doubting him just from that angle alone, which also goes back to the Zach Smith thing, where is he just going to surround himself with people that he knows? And look at the Greg Schiano, and he knows him very well. And I think also Bill Davis has had so many jobs, and you're like, well, why does he keep leaving? Why does he keep getting fired? And I think there are a lot of questions that cause some preconceived notions, and then there's a lot of play that confirmed those notions, whether those notions were accurate or not. You saw what you saw and were able to put reasons behind them because the lack of production was there. So I think it was justified just because he's the coach, and there was questionable play, but there are so many injuries, and that position was in a flux all season long.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to write him off, but he didn't do anything to answer those concerns last fall, I don't think.
All right, what's next?
All right, last question from at Tani Gerdeman, mm-hmm. I don't know,
right?
Something like that. Which B1G coach would you pick as a euchre teammate?
Now, Tom, do you play euchre? Have you played euchre?
I have played euchre. I played euchre at OSU a million years ago. I did not grow up in Ohio, so I was not classically trained in euchre, as all state residents must be according to state law. But I have played, but I have not played it in probably 15 to 20 years at this point. Probably.
That's why I asked, because it's completely understandable, because you grew up out of the Midwest borders, not the Big Ten footprint, because that's constantly growing. So I went through and just looking at all of the Big Ten coaches actually, and like I should have done a power ranking of what they would be as partners, but Tom Allen grew up in Eastern Indiana, so he can play. He's right there, and he's right in the wheelhouse of euchredom. Now, DJ Durkin, even though he's at Maryland, where euchre does not exist, he went to school at Bowling Green. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, Bowling Green plays euchre, because that's where I learned it when I was in high school. You go to BGSU for the parties, and then you just end up playing euchre. Now, Jim Harbaugh, I don't see him as a good euchre partner, because I just see him, like, say you're all sitting around a table, and I just see him staring off in the distance, and you'd be like, Jim, it's your lead. Jim, it's your lead. And he'd be like, oh, what's Trump again? And then like 20 seconds would go by, and you'd be like, Jim. And like, oh. And I just think it'd be like 6-hour games of euchre with him. Now, like Mark D'Antonio, he's an Ohio guy, Michigan guy, so he knows. And Tom, he would be like, he's the kind of guy that would have no problem like just destroying his grandmother in euchre.
See, I like your D'Antonio choice there. My choice, I have two choices here. One is, am I trying to win or am I trying to have fun? So if I'm trying to win, I go with Urban Meyer, because Urban Meyer never fails to give off the vibe that he will do any, he seems like the kind of person that is going to be the most hyper competitive in absolutely everything he does. So I think that probably applies to football, that probably applies to baseball, that probably applies to card games, that probably applies to, if you're out hitting golf balls or, closest to the pin competition. I have a feeling he's probably hyper competitive about that too. So if your goal is to win, I would go with Urban Meyer there. And he's from Ohio, so he obviously knows how to play the game.
Right, but I don't think he's played since his days at BG if then. He doesn't strike me as a euchre guy. He strikes me more as maybe a poker guy, but he doesn't have time for this stuff, is what he strikes me as. Who's your other guy?
If you're trying to have fun, my answer for pretty much everything is PJ Fleck, because you don't know what's going to happen, but it's probably going to be zany. So I think PJ Fleck wouldn't be again, I don't know. He's an Ohio guy, right? I think he's from Ohio, but he's put it this way, he's probably a lot more entertaining to hang out with than either Mark D'Antonio or Jim Harbaugh or James Franklin or any of those guys.
He's actually, I believe, from Illinois, because then he went to Northern Illinois. But the whole, do you want to win or do you want to have fun? I think Chris Ash is sneaky good. He's a guy that you would play with if you want to win, because I think he's a defensive guy. Although I'm kind of a defensive guy too, so I don't know that we would mesh. What it comes down to for me is Pat Fitzgerald, but then I think it depends on, is he the kind of player who gets better the more he drinks, like me, or does he because this is a guy, he has issues late in games, so I don't want him having issues late in euchre, but he's not drinking late in games.
Probably.
Maybe he needs to, and if he did, maybe they would win more. And if so, then that's the guy I want, because the more he drinks, I'm just assuming, the better he gets. Plus, I think he would have a really good time as well. Now, Paul Christ, I will say, Paul Christ, he is euchre. He is euchre. He's Wisconsin. He's been in Pittsburgh. He is euchre. But I'm going to choose Fitz.
Every time someone tells me, well, the more I drink, the better I get at fill in the blank, it's always like, I think I'd like to have a doctor evaluate that statement. Let's see some actual hard testing on this, because I have a feeling it's like when people drink and they think they're getting better at karaoke, and no, you're not. You're getting more enthusiastic at karaoke, and that is not the same thing.
They're pretty close.
So yeah, I'm gonna need a doctor's note to judge your drunken euchre skill level.
I play better after I've had a few. All right, I think we covered it, and in nearly 52 minutes. That's awesome.
We could just split the show into 3 different shows and just take the next couple weeks off, because
you're right.
I don't know. I'm about to say, I don't know what we're going to talk about next week, and we're going to go 2.5 hours next week, because this is what we do. This is what we do during the summertime.
Well, plus now we've come up with a plot device and the plot points for Brown Thunder. So even if we come up with 20 minutes of show, Ohio State podcast worthy, there's still 25 minutes of Brown Thunder we could do.
Just do a table read next week for Brown Thunder episode 1.
Yes. I can't wait for that show. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Tom, where can we find you on Twitter?
I am at Tom Orr 4, TOMORR 4. The show is at Accost the Field, which we haven't really done much with that, but you should follow it, because we'll probably do something with it at some point, and then if you miss it, you'll be sorry. Maybe that's where we'll drop our Brown Thunder trailer. We'll drop it on the Accost the Field account, and you got to be following that in order to find it. And we're only going to give it to people who give us 5-star reviews on iTunes. Yeah, so make sure you do that too.
Now, please don't ever say "drop Brown Thunder" again. No, those 3 words do not say. But hey, everybody, thanks for listening, and make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network, and make sure to read everything that we're writing over there at theozone.net as well. And rate us, review us on iTunes. That helps us. The 5-star reviews help better. And after today's show, Tom, do you know, does iTunes, are there 6 stars? available?
They're going to be. I assume you just have to update your iOS or something, and then you'll be able to give us the 6-star reviews we have so richly earned.
All right, so thank you for doing that, and thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say it well, now say it well. Oh yeah. Say it well, now say it well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave.